Bye, Pops.
Rex, don't be a fool. All I'm asking
Making
is that
breakfast for her children, Mahad, Ryan and Muntaha, is the first of many daily duties for Aisha Imtiaz. The paratha bread is a taste of home in Karachi before a day of work and study in London. Her family is here while Aisha takes a master's degree in journalism. But she could be one of the last to enjoy the support of her loved ones after the government tightened visa rules for dependents of students.
It's just led to this peace of mind that I have my tribe with me. Especially for women of the South Asian diaspora, it's not very easy, those who have children or husbands, to leave your home country and pursue higher academics and education without having at least your husband, if not your kids, with you. I feel like it's really cutting off a huge swath of society.
Very few are now allowed to bring their dependents with them as part of government promises to cut immigration. The Home Office says that in the 12 months up to March this year, there were more than 111,000 visas issued to student dependents. That's 25% less than the previous year, but still nearly 7 times more than in 2019. Aisha is one of around 700,000 international students in the UK, accounting for about a quarter of the university's teaching income.
The thing that we're saying both to the current government and to political parties contesting this election is, for God's sake, just give people stability. We want the students who are studying abroad in 3 or 4 years' time to know what the deal is.
A better future for her daughter was a big part of Aisha's decision to leave Pakistan for the UK, while husband Saqib Rafiq has been able to work in the care industry on his visa. Aisha doesn't believe the system is being abused or that it needed fixing.
The image in our imaginations is so exaggerated that it's people's grandmas and entire cohorts of people coming in. There is intense documentation in the way that you prove that these are your children and this is your husband, so it's a very controlled process.
Student-dependent visa applications were down 79% in the first 4 months of this year following the restriction. Unless things change after the election, the childhood memories of other families will have to be made elsewhere, and some academic dreams perhaps abandoned. Paul Rees, Al Jazeera, London.
Peter Gagan is a political commentator and author of the book Democracy for Sale. Joins us now live from London. Good to have you with us. To what extent is the UK on the verge of major change on issues like immigration?
Well, it depends obviously what the incoming government does, and as your package points out, the current government, the Conservative government, has made a lot of changes. So in 2023, there was about just shy of 700,000 people migrated to the UK, which is a kind of a record high. And the government has been trying desperately to try and reduce the numbers of people who come to the UK, albeit, I think as your package shows as well, this is something the UK have been trying for a long time in terms of actually trying to attract people to come to the UK. So there was a strategy of trying to get more international students, and part of that was letting them bring their families with them. So there's been a lot of very rapid fastness on policy, and it's become a big kind of policy plank of not just the Conservative Party but of other parties too. Similarly, we have the Rwanda scheme, which hasn't even got off the ground yet. And I think the likelihood is that the incoming Labour government has been echoing some of the Conservatives' talk on immigration. They've said immigration is too high, but without really talking concretely about what they do about that or what the problems of the system are. And they've basically been kind of saying that the problems that the UK have are to do with the Conservatives running the migration system badly and that they will do a better job. But it's not quite clear exactly what that means. And we've had the kind of policies that came in January this year around blocking families coming with student visas, which are actually already having a huge impact on British universities. There's talk of some British universities going bust. So there's actually a lot of potential outcomes beyond just reducing the number of people who come to the UK. And so far in this general election, actually none of the parties have really grappled with that.
You rightly focused, I guess, there on the Labour Party and what it might do, because that's the expectation in this election is they will win it. The UK Prime Minister, however, he's been making a series of positive statements about how the country is better off now than it was in 2010, how Brexit has opened up new opportunities, how the economy is outgrowing even its competitors. Is anyone listening to that kind of positive messaging from the Conservatives?
No, frankly. I think Rishi Sunak and the Conservatives have ran a pretty disastrous campaign. The last couple of weeks has been dogged by this, what we're calling the betting gate where conservative candidates and even police officers placed bets on the time of the general election. That's dominated the headlines. And actually, if anything, this kind of Panglossian rhetoric from Rishi Sunak makes him seem very out of touch, which has been an aspect of this campaign. He has looked out of touch. He's almost looked out of touch as a prime minister for his entire tenure. And the facts just don't bear it out. People's real wages in Britain are not higher than they were in 2020. Public services are worse than they were in 2020. If you look at opinion polls, people do not feel like this is a country that's better off after 14 years of Conservative rule. And in kind of trying to depict it as that has been in a better state, I think he's really opened himself up again to being acclaimed for being out of touch. And this is somebody who's very independently wealthy. He comes from, his wife is phenomenally wealthy, and this kind of plays in, I think, to a caricature actually of Sunak as somebody who doesn't really understand the concerns of ordinary voters.
All right, thanks so much, Peter Gagan there, coming to us from the UK, political commentator he is. Now, the second round of campaigning has officially started in Iran, ahead of a presidential runoff next week. No candidate secured enough votes to win an outright majority in Friday's vote. These are the results from the first round. The sole reformist candidate, Masoud Pezeshkian, came out on top with 42.5% of the vote. He was followed by conservative Saeed Jalili, a former chief nuclear negotiator, with 38.6% of the vote. Slightly less than 40% of eligible voters took part in the election, though. That's according to the Interior Ministry. That's a new historic low turnout since the 1979 revolution. Well, joining us here in the studio is Mehran Kamravar. He's a professor of government at Georgetown University in Qatar. Good to have you with us. So, Professor, first of all, we've got to talk about this turnout, historic low. How much of a blow is this to the election?
It's a huge blow to the political system. Historically, the Iranian government has enjoyed a measure of electoral legitimacy because something in the magnitude of 60–70% of the people would turn out to vote for presidential elections. But 2021 was a turning point when we had the lowest.
48.8.
Exactly. And now we have even lower than that. So it's a huge blow to the political system in general.
A sign of what sentiment would you put that down to on the public?
A sign of utter disenchantment with the political system and a loss of ideological legitimacy and credibility on the part of officials running the country.
Now, looking at what's going to happen, going forward in the runoff, is Saeed Jalili in a stronger position now since there's no other conservative in the running? Does that put him... pole position is not the right word here, since Pezeshkian still is in pole position, but does it put the odds in his favor?
Slightly, although it depends really on how the Pezeshkian camp can scare the electorate or people who didn't vote, people who were on the fence, the so-called grey electorate, and get them out to vote. If the election, if participation rate goes above 50%, there's a good chance that Pezeshkian might actually get elected.
So hang on, what we're saying basically is the only chance Pezeshkian has at this point is if he can get people out to vote who didn't vote in the first round. Is that what we're saying?
Absolutely, absolutely. Because the other candidates, as you mentioned, for example, Parliament Speaker Ghalibaf or Pur Mohammadi, they didn't necessarily resonate with the electorate. So now what we have are two opposite camps, the arch-conservative traditionalist Jalili or the somewhat reformist Pezeshkian. And Pezeshkian, what he needs to do at this point is to ensure that people who didn't turn out in the first round would now vote in the second round.
You mentioned there an interesting point about we have two camps. Those camps have a very different history of statements on a wide range of things when it comes to relations with the West. Ghalibaf's statements, although he's out the running now, but that camp, his statements about the importance of axis of resistance versus what Pezeshkian has been talking about, or the advisors, Javad Zarif, the advisor to Pezeshkian, has been talking about his concerns about the IGRC being too involved in politics. Pezeshkian's statements about opening up and how long will we have hostile relations with the US. What's at stake for the world when you put all of that into consideration?
The Iranian president isn't all-powerful when it comes to foreign policy, but the presidency does have some powers. It was President Rouhani, after all, who signed the nuclear pact. And so I think we would see a very different Iran under Jalili versus Pezeshkian, one way or another.
All right, I guess time is going to tell. We'll be back in a week or so, or less than a week, I think, yeah?
Less than a week, exactly.
to watch this next round. Thank you so much for coming in, Nahran.
Thank you.
From Georgetown.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, still ahead on Al Jazeera, action from the Euros, where the hosts Germany are through to the quarterfinals. That's coming up with Gemma in Sport.
African stories from African perspectives.
Female boxing champion.
2 short documentaries by African filmmakers from Namibia and Ghana.
Knowing that I'm actively contributing to the change, it's really a rewarding feeling.
Sleeping on Water and The Girl from Buku, a new series of Africa Direct on Al Jazeera.
They're finished.
Hearing the facts.
We are not going to be determined by foreign narratives.
Understanding the reality.
Human rights groups are accusing Lebanese authorities of using discriminatory practices against Syrians to force them to return to their country.
With the latest global news.
This is pro-Palestinian demonstration number 15 in London.
And insightful documentaries. Al Jazeera's teams across the world bring you closer to the heart of the story.
Speed will beat you again. That's what you think. Come on, let's go.
Racer X.
All right, let's catch up on all the sports news with Gemma now.
Thank you, Sammy. Defending champions Argentina have finished top of their group at the Copa America with 3 wins from 3 and without conceding a goal. Their captain, Lionel Messi, sat out their match against Peru with a thigh injury. Lautaro Martinez stepped up in his absence. The Inter Milan striker finishing off a lovely passing move to give Argentina the lead early in the second half. The world champions were then awarded a penalty for a handball. Leandro Paredes was given the honour because it was his 30th birthday, but unfortunately for him, he missed. Argentina, though, made sure of the win with 4 minutes to go. Martinez scoring his 4th goal of the tournament to make it 2-0. Argentina had already qualified for the quarterfinals and will likely face Ecuador or Mexico next, while Peru are out. The other game in Group A saw Canada take on Chile. Chile had defender Gabriel Suazo sent off 27 minutes in for a second yellow card. Canada had the ball in the back of the net in stoppage time, but the goal was ruled out for offside as it finished 0-0. The point, though, enough for tournament debutants Canada to finish second in the group and seal a place in the quarterfinals, while Chile exits in the group stage for the first time since 2004. Jamal Musiala scored again for Germany as the hosts beat Denmark to reach the quarterfinals of the Euros. It could have gone either way in Dortmund, though. Denmark thought they'd opened the scoring in the second half through Joachim Andersen, but VAR spotted an offside in the build-up, and it was ruled out. Then straight afterwards, Germany played the ball forward and VAR got involved again, this time spotting a handball in the box by Andersen. A penalty was awarded and Arsenal's Kai Havertz put Germany in front. Then Musiala secured Germany's first win in a major tournament knockout game since 2016. He's the joint top scorer at the Euros with 3 goals overall.
I have the photo here. It was 1 centimetre offside. This is not the way we're supposed to be using VAR. And as for the penalty, I'm so tired of the ridiculous handball rule. Our player was running normally. We cannot demand that he runs with his arms behind his back. Big congratulations to Germany. They have a great team. But in my opinion, this is not how football is supposed to be.
Defending champions Italy are out. They were well beaten by Switzerland 2-0. Remo Freuler and Ruben Vargas got the goals in Berlin. It's Switzerland's first win over Italy for 31 years. For the third Euros running, the holders have gone out in the last 16 after Portugal in 2021 and Spain in 2016. Switzerland will face England or Slovakia in the quarter-finals. Those sides play their last 16 match on Sunday, while Germany will take on the winner of Spain-Georgia. That match kicks off in Cologne at 19 GMT. So it's England-Slovakia first up on Sunday. The Euro 2020 runners-up topped their group, but only scored twice in the 3 games and have come under heavy scrutiny for their performances. Manager Gareth Southgate says he's doing his best to block out the criticism.
A team is never quite as poor as people might think, and never quite as good as people might think. Therefore, you've got to be very careful not to throw everything out the window and lose things that you're doing well and lose continuity and the confidence that comes from players playing together and the understanding that comes from those moments. And you have to ignore external advice and be assured in what you're doing.
India captain Rohit Sharma and Virat Kohli both ended their international T20 careers on a high after India won the World Cup in Barbados. Kohli smashed 76 runs in the final against South Africa, helping India post a total of 176, which was the highest score in a T20 World Cup final. South Africa looked on track to get there, but they were halted in their tracks by a spectacular catch on the boundary by Surya Kumar Yadav. Brilliant stuff there. They fell 7 runs short of what would have been their first ever World Cup title. It ended India's 11-year wait for a major trophy.
I have enjoyed since the time I started playing this format, and nothing better time to say goodbye to this format. I have loved every moment of this. I started my India career playing this format, and this is what I wanted. I wanted to win the cup and say thank you.
No surprise to see celebrations back home in India, where cricket is the #1 sport. Before this victory, they'd seen their team lose 5 straight finals across all formats. Once again, Max Verstappen is the man to catch going into the Austrian Grand Prix. Red Bull's 3-time world champion extended his lead in the standings by winning the sprint race on Saturday before going on to secure pole position in qualifying. The Dutchman will start ahead of his nearest title rival, Lando Norris, who's second on the grid with McLaren. Reigning MotoGP world champion Francesco Bagnaia led from start to finish to win the sprint race in Assen. Marc Marquez's challenge, though, ended early as he crashed out on the 2nd lap. Bagnaia finished ahead of championship leader Jorge Martin, while Aleix Espargaro came off on the final lap and will sit out Sunday's Dutch Grand Prix. Bagnaia starts on pole for the race, with Martin down in 5th after being hit with a grid penalty. With 1 round to go at the Rocket Mortgage Classic in Detroit, it's still the same 2 players tied at the top. Akshay Bhatia and Aaron Rai both birdied their penultimate hole to move to 17 under par, but that's just 1 shot clear of the field. And now to something that is becoming a regular feature in our sports bulletins, a home run by, yes, you've guessed it, Shohei Ohtani. This is his 26th of the season, and it helped the Los Angeles Dodgers beat the San Francisco Giants 14-7. And finally, keep your eye on the left of the screen. A terrible mistake by Toronto's goalkeeper in the MLS. Luka Gavran didn't see Atlanta's Jamal Tiari behind him. He stole the ball and scored the winner in the 97th minute. Oh dear, that is all your sport for now. More later. Sammy.
Thanks so much, Emma. Now, the Army general who led a reported coup attempt in Bolivia earlier this week has been transferred to a maximum security prison just outside the capital, La Paz. The former Army chief, General Juan José Zuniga, was sentenced to 6 months pre-trial detention. Zuniga says he was following orders from President Luis Arce, which the president denies. Al Jazeera's Teresa Bo sat down for an interview with the president.
Luis Arce was thrust into the global spotlight last Wednesday when rogue military units seized the central square of La Paz. The president immediately denounced a coup.
Mr. President, we all saw the images of military units in the plaza in front of the presidential palace, of the military entering the presidential palace, of you confronting a general and telling him that he has to respect the constitutional powers. But many people in the country believe that this was something organized by the government. What would you say to them?
Ocurre el enfrentamiento que hemos tenido ahí cara a cara con el general Zúñiga, que se revela. Ven cómo yo le exijo que cumpla la Constitución Política del Estado y respete el mando militar. Cuando yo lo enfrenté, él me desobedeció abiertamente. ¿Qué duda puede haber de eso? ¿Qué duda puede haber? Y tercero, las declaraciones posteriores, donde lanza su globito de ensayo que parece que está muy bien asesorado el general Zúñiga.
But what do you think what went wrong? I mean, was it military intelligence? What failed?
Bueno, es que inteligencia estaba en manos de gente de absoluta confianza de la generación. Nunca reportaron. A nosotros nos quedó claro que era un golpe de Estado planificado. Y esa planificación se la hizo con bastante tiempo de anticipación y se gatilla a las 10 de la mañana en una reunión que todos ellos tuvieron, los militares, en el Estado Mayor.
Bolivia is in the middle of an economic crisis, of a political crisis, with a confrontation within the party between you and former President Evo Morales. How can you guarantee stability until the elections next year?
Esto debería hacer reflexionar a los compañeros evistas, deberían hacerlos reflexionar. Porque la economía tiene problemas, pero se pueden resolver y en eso estamos trabajando. Y estamos dando respuesta al país en la resolución de los problemas, ¿no? Decían que subían los precios, nos tomó medidas, los precios otra vez han vuelto a bajar. Se toman medidas, no es que no se tomen medidas. Había desabastecimiento de combustible, ahora tenemos abastecimiento de combustible. Se toman medidas, se trabaja, se hace, se muestra el resultado. Pero hay gente interesada en mostrar todas esas condiciones, ¿no? Para justamente generar las condiciones para que venga este tipo de situaciones. Y en este caso está claro que los compañeros que están al otro lado con el levismo han sido, ¿no?, partícipes de generar esas condiciones que están aprovechando los que quieren dar el golpe no solamente al gobierno, al pueblo boliviano, a nuestro Estado plurinacional de Bolivia y a nuestra revolución democrática y popular.
That's it from me for this news hour. We're back with more of the day's news. That's coming up in a couple of minutes. Stay with us.
Hard-hitting interviews.
Is Israel an obstacle to peace? I think that Netanyahu and his government with this strategy is getting isolated.
Thought-provoking answers.
The EU-made weapons are being used in Gaza. No guns should be used in an offensive way. That's our attitude.
Facing realities.
Your running mate, what does he bring to the table apart from being President Joko Widodo's son?
We cannot take the fact that he's the son of President as not an important factor.
Hear their story on Talk to Al Jazeera.
The latest news.
For the findings here could be used by the International Criminal Court as further pieces of evidence of Israel's war crimes in Gaza.
With detailed coverage.
Most of the 36 hospitals in Gaza have been destroyed, and critical health care remain inaccessible.
From the heart of the story.
The images from Jenin are part of the overall picture in the occupied West Bank, where violent Israeli military raids are relentless.
My name is Brandon Jackson. I'm from Shreveport, Louisiana. I've recently been released on parole after 25 and a half years. I have been free now less than 90 days.
After a lifetime in prison, a man is now free to fight against archaic racist laws that belong to the past. Fault lines, conviction on Al Jazeera.
Turn now to the dangerous new storm threats across the South. Tornado that human activities are responsible for the heat.
Limited access to some water.
The era of global warming has ended. The era of global boiling has arrived.
The French president casts his ballot in the first round of the parliamentary election. The far-right National Rally is hoping to make big gains. Hello there, I'm Nastasia Tain. This is Al Jazeera live from Doha. Also coming up, intense battles are taking place between Israeli soldiers and Palestinian fighters in northern Gaza's Sujaiya neighborhood. Sudan's paramilitary rapid support forces say they've captured the capital of Sana'a state in the southeast. The army, though, says it is still fighting in that region. Plus,
I'm Kamal Haider in Peshawar, where millions of Afghans are being repatriated by force. Well, France is heading to the polls in elections that could bring great uncertainty to the country and to Europe. For the first time, the far-right National Rally Party of Marine Le Pen has the chance to become the largest in a vote that could see support for President Emmanuel Macron's centrist bloc dwindle. The final outcome after next Sunday's second round could also lead to a political stalemate. Step Basson begins our coverage now from Nice.
3 weeks ago, nobody in France was expecting to go to the polls today. But here they are, voting in a snap election seen as President Emmanuel Macron's big gamble. Nearly 50 million registered voters will decide if his political center will survive, or if their votes go to the far right or to the far left. Here in the south of France, a traditional stronghold of the far right, immigration has become the main topic.
Speaking about Nice, for me the main problem is security. I am from Nice and I no longer feel it's my city, and it makes people like me want to leave.
We are French, but they call us second-class citizens because we have two citizenships. They will favor those who are born French, meaning looking at skin color, religion, etc. And that's what we don't want. That will put people like us in an uncomfortable position.
Casting his vote, the president shows an optimistic face. But she could be the one celebrating. Marine Le Pen and her protégé, 28-year-old Jordan Bardella, who has a chance to become France's first far-right prime minister. The National Rally Party has tried to soften its image, but opponents say its strong anti-immigration stance is a danger to French values and turns millions of people into second-class citizens. The leftist New Popular Front has formed a loose coalition to counter the far right. Led by the socialist Unbowed Party of Jean-Luc Mélenchon, they have campaigned on lowering the pension age and making immigration easier, which would turn back reforms implemented by Macron.
It's seen as the most crucial election in decades, which could move the country in a very different direction. A polarized mood here in the conservative south could predict sentiments in the rest of the country. Only after the second round next Sunday, the French will know if and how uncertain the political future of their country will be. Step Fasten, Al Jazeera, Nice.
Well, let's find out how polling is going and speak to our correspondent Jonah Hull. He's in the French capital, Paris. Jonah, as we watch these queues, I expect turnout's looking quite high, reflecting just what's at stake here.
Yeah, I can tell you where I'm standing now. The queues have suddenly disappeared. It is lunchtime in France, and the French, of course, take that pretty seriously. But turnout has been brisk all morning. 25% had turned out here in the 14th arrondissement of Paris by midday. That is extremely high, and precincts around the country all reporting high turnout. It is very clear that the French public all too aware of what is at stake. Now, reporting restrictions on the day of the vote mean I can't go into actual opinion polls or firm projections, but it's also worth noting that in this two-round system that France has, it's quite difficult to make any predictions off the basis of the first round. The week to come will see heavy jockeying among the parties, shifting alliances, candidates in individual districts standing back to allow a stronger one in who has the best chance of beating the far right. That has been the sort of collective tradition of French politics for many, many years. And as Step was pointing out there, the far right this time round very much in contention. The National Rally of Marine Le Pen did extremely well in the European parliamentary elections at the beginning of this month that sparked this snap election, winning double the number of votes of Emmanuel Macron's centrist alliance. And of course, there is another force in French politics now, this leftist bloc that nobody saw coming. Emmanuel Macron may well have been gambling that the disparate parties of the left would have sent votes his way for his central alliance to counter the far right. That may not happen, this centrist bloc now of the Socialists, the Communists, the Greens, and of course the far left France Unbowed party of Jean-Luc Mélenchon now also a factor.
Well, Jonah, let me ask you the question so many are wondering. Why then, from a position of apparent weakness, did Macron even call this election?
Why are we coming to a stop? It's just my idea of fair play.
Do you really mean you're going to help them?
Look, I mean, many in France, many voters, many politicians are perplexed by that very question, not least in Emmanuel Macron's own party, of course, having suffered that defeat in the European parliamentary elections. He called within hours this snap poll, essentially, he said, asking the French public for what he described as clarification. He wanted to put to them a very simple proposition: do you really want to be governed by the far right, by this party of Marine Le Pen that, despite an attempted rebranding and cleanup since 2011, still displays these tendencies towards racism, xenophobia, anti-Islamic feeling, homophobia? He was gambling, essentially, that the European parliamentary vote was a protest vote rather than an expression of true political intent. Earlier, I spoke to Pierre Haski. He's a seasoned political commentator here in Paris, and this is how he sees things unfolding.
We would be confronted with a cohabitation. You know, it's a French word that means that you have a different president and prime minister from two different political parties. We've had that before in the past under François Mitterrand and Jacques Chirac, but the two parties were not as far apart as President Macron and the National Rally would be this time. So it is uncharted territory for France, with huge consequences for Europe, for Ukraine, for the foreign policy of France.
Well, Emmanuel Macron will get his answer soon enough. France will get its answer soon enough. The first sort of shades of a fuller picture emerging later tonight, the rest of it coming in about a week's time.
We'll be watching very closely indeed. Jonah Hull there for us in the French capital, watching polling today. Thanks, Jonah. Well, intense fighting has been taking place in Gaza City, where Israel's military has continued shelling residential neighborhoods. Smoke could be seen billowing above the area of Shujaiya, while attacks were also carried out on the neighborhood of Zaytun. A number of Palestinians caught up in days of fighting around Gaza City have managed to escape to find medical help. We understand at least 2 Israeli soldiers have been killed.
As the Israeli tanks advanced, they were coupled with massive gunfire. I saw all people running for their lives. I returned home to take my family, but within minutes, the Israeli tanks have already surrounded the area. We couldn't leave, so we were locked in for 3 days.
The Israeli soldiers stormed our home, threw gas bombs all over the ground floor and stun grenades. They smashed the door and opened fire on us. We kept screaming that we are all women and children. We raised white flags, but no response. The Israeli soldiers kept shooting and shouting at us, non-stop.
Well, let's speak to our correspondent on the ground, Hind Budari. She's in Deir al-Balah in central Gaza. Hind, as we watch that offensive in Shujaiya continue, more and more Palestinian families have fled, but there are still many, many trapped there.
Yes, for more than 4 days now, since the Shujaiya incursion started, there are families that were unable to evacuate. They were unable to leave their houses due to the heavy artillery shelling, airstrikes, drones, and quadcopters. There has been an appeal from Al-Madani family saying that they are trapped. No one could reach them, no medical teams, no journalists, no ambulances. They're trying to call the Red Cross or any international organization to evacuate them. For days, they're out of water, they're out of food, they're also under constant fire, artillery shelling and airstrike. This is one of the family that was able to raise their voice and to send their message to journalists, and we're trying to spread the message, but there are tens of other families still trapped. We have been trying to talk to the medical teams on the ground in Shujaiya to ask them about the casualties. Are they reaching the people in Al-Shujaiya? And they're saying that it's very hard for the medical teams to reach that area due to the intensive fighting and the intensive artillery shelling and the airstrikes. And let me remind you that there is only one hospital in the central Gaza city still working, which is the Ahli hospital. But the medical teams there, they're saying that they could not reach people. They do not know if there are people trapped under the rubble, if there are people injured, if there are people killed. They could not reach anyone. And this is continuing for the fourth consecutive day. It's very intensifying in Al-Shuja'iyya and also in Rafah, where there has been continuous fighting and continuous artillery shelling in the past couple of days. And also people were trapped yesterday in Al-Shakush area, and the medical teams and the ambulances were also not able to reach them. So the same exact scenario is happening across the Gaza Strip, and people are being internally forced to become displaced over and over again. But people are saying and telling us that they believe that there is no place safe in Gaza. Wherever they go, they're still being targeted by the Israeli forces.
Hind Kudari there with all the very latest for us, reporting from the ground in Deir al-Balah. Thank you, Hind. Now, Sudan's paramilitary rapid support forces say they've captured an important city in the southeast. They claim to have taken over Sinjar, the capital of Sana'a state. The Sudanese army, though, says that it is still fighting in that area. Thousands of people have been forced to flee their homes due to the fighting between the army and the RSF. This conflict has already created the world's largest displacement crisis. According to a UN-backed study, nearly 26 million people, that's half of Sudan's population, are facing food shortages, with 755,000 on the brink of starvation. Well, let's take a closer look at where the fighting has been taking place over recent days. The army and the paramilitary forces have been engaged in fierce battles in several states. Now, in North Darfur, they fought for several days around the state capital, Al-Fasher. In the southeast, in Sana'a state, the army is involved with intense battles with the RSF. Fighting is also happening in Baba Nusa, that's in West Kordofan state. The RSF say that they took the state capital, Al-Fula, some 10 days ago. And in the capital, Khartoum, and its surrounding region, there is also tension. Hiba Morgan has more from them.
The RSF is gaining more and more control of territory around Sudan, especially towards the southeastern and southwestern parts of the country. They already control a large portion of the Darfur region, with the exception of Al-Fasher, which is the only remaining city under army control, along with other armed groups allied to the army. But then when you look at the rest of the country, especially towards the southeastern and southwestern sides, it looks like the RSF is gaining control. What we do know for sure is that they say that they've taken control of the army base, the 17th Infantry Division there in Sinjar in southeastern Sudan. The army does not dispute that claim, but they do say that their forces are still present in the city and they are still fighting. But what we definitely can confirm is that civilians have witnessed the clashes, and many of them have started leaving the city since yesterday when the fighting took place. And more people are leaving the city this morning as we're speaking. Many of the people who are in Sinjar, people who have fled from other conflict zones, people who have fled from Khartoum, here the capital, towards Sinjar, back to their hometowns because they deemed that it would be safer. People who have fled from the Darfur region. Many people were already people who have been displaced, and they lived in host communities getting assistance from aid agencies. Now these people are once again forced to flee, in addition to the residents of Sinjar city. So we're likely to see the number of people who are displaced from the conflict, which is already the highest in the world, increase even further.
At least 3 Hezbollah fighters have been killed after an Israeli drone attack in southern Lebanon. The Israeli military has been targeting the village of Hula for the past 2 days now. Israel and Hezbollah have been exchanging near daily cross-border fire since the war in Gaza began. Well, let's now speak to our correspondent, Asad Beg. He's in Marjayoun, that's in southern Lebanon. Asad, talk us through what's been happening there on that border. We've seen tensions build and fears of escalation grow.
Absolutely. Tensions have been building. There has been escalation. Now, what we can tell you is that not long ago, Hezbollah confirmed that 3 of their fighters had been killed in those drone strikes on that border town of Hula. Now, there has been exchange of fire along the southern border. Israel carries out strikes using fighter jets, using missiles, using drones and artillery against these border towns, villages and cities. And then Hezbollah also hits Israeli positions. Now, this town of Hula has been targeted 2 days in a row, and we believe it was an Israeli drone. And as I said, Hezbollah have confirmed at least 3 of their fighters have been killed. But Hezbollah have also said that they've hit Israeli positions. Now, they say that they used anti-tank missiles against the settlements of Avivim and Metula. And Metula is not far from where I'm standing now. In fact, we can see it from this hilltop. Now, Hezbollah have also released drone footage of them, what they say is striking soldiers' barracks in Birkit Risha, again along the southern border. But also last night, sonic booms were heard across Lebanon. Now, that's when fighter jets travel faster than the speed of sound. Now, we saw 2 Israeli jets in the sky last night, along with that sound, that sonic boom. It's this incredibly loud sound that shakes buildings, and it's thought that it's used as a source of intimidation and harassment. It stops people from sleeping, it scares people, but also it's a game of cat and mouse with Hezbollah, because on June the 6th, Hezbollah claimed that they fired an anti-aircraft missile, and this could be Israel trying to figure out what weapons and systems Hezbollah have. But we have to remember, Lebanon is a sovereign country, and these are Israeli jets coming into Lebanese airspace. So, as I said, tensions have been building, and there is a fear of escalation. And the latest is that Saudi Arabia has urged its citizens to leave Lebanon. Other countries have urged their citizens not to travel here, and if they're here, they've urged them to leave. And there is a fear that this could turn out into an all-out war. But as you said, the tensions and strikes along the southern border have been continuing daily.
Asad Beg there for us in Marjaloon in southern Lebanon. Thank you very much, Asad. Well, still ahead here on Al Jazeera. The UK tightens its visa rules. What that could mean for international students and their families.
We gotta make time, Speed. We're still behind the other races. Hang on, Sparky.
Welcome back. You're watching Al Jazeera. Let's remind you about top stories this hour. National Rally leader Marine Le Pen has cast her vote in France as the nation holds its first snap parliamentary elections in nearly 30 years. Le Pen and her far-right party are hoping to make some big gains. 2 rounds of voting will choose 577 MPs. Israel's military has been carrying out artillery shelling in the Shujaiya neighborhood in Gaza City. The army has also targeted the nearby area of Zaytun in the past few hours. In the south of the Strip, injuries and deaths have been reported after Israeli forces bombed a house in Rafah. Sudan's paramilitary rapid support forces say they've captured an important city in the southeast. They claim they're now in control of the city of Sinjar, the capital of Sinnar state. The army, though, says that it is still fighting in that area. At least 7 people, including 3 children, have been killed in a Russian missile strike in Vilnyansk in southeastern Ukraine. Local officials say 11 others were also badly injured. The missiles hit critical infrastructure as well as several residential buildings. Well, the second round of campaigning has officially begun in Iran ahead of a presidential runoff next week. No candidate secured enough votes to win an outright majority in Friday's vote. Let's take a look at the results from the first round. The sole reformist candidate, Masoud Pezeshkian, came out on top with 42.5% of the vote. He was followed by conservative Saeed Jalili, a former chief nuclear negotiator, with 38.6% of the vote. Slightly less than 40% of eligible voters took part in this election, according to the Interior Ministry. That would make it a new historic low turnout since the 1979 revolution. Zain Khadr reports now from Tehran.
Iran's division stood in the way of a candidate winning enough votes to assume the presidency. A second round of voting is scheduled in less than a week. A contest that will be between a conservative and a reformist. Neither got the more than 50% of votes needed to win. The vote also saw a historic low turnout, in a possible sign that many Iranians may not believe change can come from the ballot box.
I didn't vote, neither did any of my family members, and I believe the voter turnout was even less than 40%.
It will be only the second runoff in Iran's recent history. The two candidates who will now be vying for the presidency can't be any different. Reformist Masoud Pezeshkian, who enjoyed a slight lead, wants to improve relations with the West to allow for the lifting of sanctions. His reformist credentials appealed to some of those disillusioned with the system, but it wasn't enough.
None of the candidates are capable to manage the country. They also didn't represent the people.
Saeed Jalili, the other presidential hopeful, doesn't represent a break from the past. He wants to follow the look towards the East policy of the late President Ibrahim Raisi, and has been criticized for clamping down on civil liberties.
I believe that Jalili can run the country better because he has more experience in government. I don't know anything about Pezeshkian.
The Conservatives were able to rely on their core base, 20% of their electorate, but they were at a disadvantage without a consensus candidate.
The results of Friday's vote show the internal divisions within the Conservative camp that holds power. They also show the reformist wing's struggle to remain relevant, at least the faction that does not challenge but tries to change from within the system.
There's voter apathy here, and the electorate is largely divided. There have also been years of economic hardships, largely caused by the sanctions. Now with the runoff vote set to take place on July the 5th, turnout will once again play a big role. Zain Khadr, Al Jazeera, Tehran.
Well, to another election now, and immigration is one of the major issues ahead of next week's general election in the UK. For families of overseas students who are studying there, recent changes to visa rules may force them to rethink where they can learn and live. Paul Rees reports from London.
Making breakfast for her children, Mahad, Ryan and Muntaha, is the first of many daily duties for Aisha Imtiaz. The paratha bread is a taste of home in Karachi before a day of work and study in London. Her family is here while Aisha takes a master's degree in journalism. But she could be one of the last to enjoy the support of her loved ones after the government tightened visa rules for dependents of students.
It's just led to this peace of mind that I have my tribe with me. Especially for women of the South Asian diaspora, it's not very easy, those who have children or husbands, to leave your home country and pursue higher academics and education without having at least your husband, if not your kids, with you. I feel like it's really cutting off a huge swath of society.
Very few are now allowed to bring their dependents with them as part of government promises to cut immigration. The Home Office says that in the 12 months up to March this year, there were more than 111,000 visas issued to student dependents. That's 25% less than the previous year, but still nearly 7 times more than in 2019. Aisha is one of around 700,000 international students in the UK, accounting for about a quarter of universities' teaching income.
The thing that we're saying both to the current government and to political parties contesting this election is, for God's sake, just give people stability. We want the students who are thinking about maybe studying abroad in 3 or 4 years' time to know what the deal is.
A better future for her daughter was a big part of Aisha's decision to leave Pakistan for the UK, while husband Saqib Rafiq has been able to work in the care industry on his visa. Aisha doesn't believe the system is being abused or that it needed fixing.
The image in our imaginations is so exaggerated that it's people's grandmas and entire cohorts of people coming in. There's intense documentation in the way that you prove that these are your children and this is your husband. So it's a very controlled process.
Student-dependent visa applications were down 79% in the first 4 months of this year following the restriction. Unless things change after the election, the childhood memories of other families will have to be made elsewhere, and some academic dreams perhaps abandoned. Paul Rees, Al Jazeera, London.
The second phase of a controversial plan to deport Afghan refugees from Pakistan is set to begin. More than 800,000 Afghans could be expelled, and if they don't leave voluntarily, they will face arrest and deportation. More than 541,000 were forced to leave in the initial phase, which began last November. Kamal Haider has more from the Khazana refugee camp in Peshawar, where Afghans have been staying.
The deadline for Afghan refugees has already come to an end. 600,000 Afghans have already gone back to their country. Now the Pakistani government says it will force all illegal aliens in Pakistan to be expelled from Pakistan. This, of course, is going to cause huge humanitarian problems for people who have called Pakistan home for decades. This is where their children were born. This is where they have buried their elders. And they say that they need to be given more time to pack up and to also wind up their livelihood. Many have made investments in this country, and now they want more time so that they're able to make arrangements to go back in a dignified manner. They complain that there is a knock on the door in the dead of the night. They're not given any time to leave this country. And this, of course, is going to create a huge humanitarian crisis because Afghanistan is still not at peace. And these people don't know what they are going back to. They complain that Pakistan should have given them more time. They are thankful for the fact that Pakistanis have looked after them, but they're not happy about the undignified way in which they are being now thrown out of the country. The government of Pakistan, on the other hand, says there is zero tolerance for illegal aliens after a spate of attacks inside Pakistan, which Pakistan blames on illegal aliens. But because Afghans constitute the majority of the population of foreigners living in this country, they are now going to feel the brunt. Kamal Haider, Al Jazeera, at the Khazana refugee camp in Peshawar.
Now, the Army general who led a reported coup attempt in Bolivia earlier this week has been transferred to a maximum security prison just outside the capital, La Paz. The former Army chief, General Juan José Zuniga, was sentenced to 6 months pretrial detention. Zuniga says he was following orders from President Luis Arce, which the president denies. Well, that's it from me, Anastasia Tay. Next, Inside Story looks at the rise of the far right in France. Do stay with us here on Al Jazeera.
Let's get going with your weather update. Great to have you along. Copious amounts of rain for Japan's main island of Honshu here. Darker the blue and the yellow. That is the more intense rain that we're dealing with. These are our seasonal summer rains just setting up here. It's going to give us a soaking. A couple 100 millimeters of rain certainly could produce some landslides. All of this wet weather kicks back over the East China Sea, right across the Yangtze River Valley. Places like Wuhan getting striped with solid bands of rain, and same goes for Guilin in Guangxi province too. To the Middle East, here's how this story goes. Not really dealing with a brisk wind up and down the Gulf, so not a lot of humidity, not hazy, at least for now. It's looking like later in the week things will change. Kuwait could close in on 50 degrees. Same goes for Basra, and for us here in Doha, 45 is what we're shooting for on Monday. A breeze off the Arabian Sea here means sand and dust storms are likely in Karachi, 36 degrees. Some showers up against the foothills of the Himalaya there in northern Pakistan, so Islamabad could catch a few drops. Most of the intense rain in India is in the northeast states of Arunachal Pradesh. We've got highest level alerts issued for just how much rain we're going to see over the next little bit, so that could produce some flooding. Be careful out there.
Forget that. For generosity like yours, the only reward is defeat. He's right.
What does AI really mean for the future of humanity?
What sort of future society do we want to create with all this technology we're making?
Do we still have power of choice?
AGIs which are truly autonomous and operating on their own behalf.
This is the apocalyptic vision.
Or is it already too late?
So now we have corporations with more power, might, and ability than entire countries.
The future is going to be good for the AIs. It would be nice if it were good for humans as well.
iHuman on Al Jazeera.
France is preparing to vote in a snap general election. It was called after the far right made big gains in European Parliament elections. So what will a potential victory by the far right mean for France's future, and how will it shape politics in the rest of Europe? This is Inside Story. Hello, welcome to the program. I'm Hashim Ahalbaba. France has been gripped by two events that are happening in the coming weeks. One is the Summer Olympic Games in Paris, but the other is the snap election called by President Emmanuel Macron after Marine Le Pen's far-right national rally made huge gains in European elections. With Macron's Ensemble alliance teetering on the edge of collapse, the stakes couldn't be higher. His decision to call an early election has galvanized all sides of the political spectrum. Can Macron's centrist vision survive? Or is the French Republic on the brink of a significant political shift? We'll get to our guests in a moment. First, this report from Axel Zaimovic.
Wrapping up a campaign few saw coming. French President Emmanuel Macron shocked the nation earlier this month when he dissolved the National Assembly and called a snap election. It was in response to his center-right party loss to the far-right in France's EU elections. Macron says he acted on voters' resentments.
If I thought I'd done everything right, I wouldn't be standing here today. I wouldn't have dissolved the government and everything would be fine. So, yes, I do take some responsibility.
Opinion polls suggest the far-right national rally led by Marine Le Pen is leading, and it's likely poised to shake the French political landscape.
We have the possibility of winning these elections and creating a unity government that will get this country out of a rut.
The party's campaign is built on attacks against migrants, Muslims, and the EU. Some voters find it concerning.
It's threatening for us citizens with different nationalities. It's not easy to live in a country that no longer wants us, that threatens us and tells us we are no longer welcome while we participate in the French economy. We studied here, pay taxes.
There have been a lot of changes in this election cycle. The Conservative Party is divided about possibly joining forces with the far right, and the left-wing bloc, including socialists, Greens, and communists, have formed an unexpected alliance. France's moment of truth comes in two rounds, this Sunday and on July 7th. If the far right wins, Macron's risk will have failed, and it could usher in France's first populist government, putting his political credibility and legacy on the line. Axel Zaimovic, Al Jazeera, for Inside Story.
Let's bring in our guests in Paris. Renaud Girard, journalist and chief foreign correspondent at Le Figaro. In London, Rainbow Murray, professor of politics at Queen Mary University of London and specialist in French politics in Marseille. Hugo Jochon, associate professor of political theory at the University of Nottingham. Welcome to the program. Bruno, why is this consensus now that this election could perhaps be the most consequential in generations in France?
Yeah, you know, when I was young, in '74, the father of Marine Le Pen, Jean-Marie Le Pen, he ran for the presidential election. He got only 1% of the vote. Now, in the next general elections, the polls are giving, let's wait for the results, of course, but the polls are giving more than 36% to her daughter. It's true that her daughter is much softer than her father. There is no anti-Semitism at all with her, and she changed her mind about Europe, and she said that France should stay within the European Union and the Euro system. But still, it is the same kind of party, so it's a huge progress from 74 to now.
Remember, the party of President Emmanuel Macron has been asking people not to vote for the far right, warning, quoting Prime Minister Gabriel Attal, saying that the vote could unleash impulses of hate and aggression. Is it too late?
Thank you. One way to stop people voting for the far right, obviously, is not to call an election. So Macron has already let the cat out amongst the pigeons. I think his motivation was that he saw how well they were doing in the polls, and he thought maybe if people actually face the prospect of a far-right government, that will give them pause for thought, it will scare them, and it will send them running back to the centre. I think that was his strategy, to try and recover some of his lost popularity. I don't think it's worked. He isn't any more popular as a result of calling this election. He's going to end up with fewer seats than he had before, and people are still flocking to the far right. And it's a mixture of push and pull. It's partly being pushed away from mainstream politics because of the perceived failure of all the other parties, and it's partly the pull factor of the far right, that they are giving messages that are landing well at the moment with the French electorate, who are disappointed with everything else and are now ready to try something different.
Hugo, you look at all the polls that suggest that the national rally is heading towards massive political gains. We are yet to see whether they're going to have an absolute majority, but at this stage, can we say that they are definitely going to shape the future of politics in France for many years to come?
For sure, they are going to shape, and they've already been shaping it. As you rightly said, it's important to remember that in France, there's two rounds. There's a first round that is tomorrow, and then there's a second round the week after it. So polls suggest, indeed, that the Rassemblement National, Marine Le Pen's party, led by Jordan Bardella, is around 35%. The left-wing alliance is around 28%. Macron's party, Ensemble, led by Gabriel Attal, is around 20%. So, but the big question is, in France, with the second round, is often it's a runoff between two candidates, perhaps three candidates. And the big question for coming next week is going to be, faced with a candidate from the Rassemblement National, what does Emmanuel Macron's party do, and what does the left-wing alliance do? Does the left-wing alliance and the centrist party, do they agree that whoever is the best placed from their candidates, if there's three of them, will the second one desist and allow either the left-wing candidate or the centrist candidate to face the Rassemblement National candidate on their own, and therefore perhaps bring those two blocks of votes together against the far right, or not? And I think that's one of the big challenges we're going to see next week.
Bruno, let's try to unpack what is happening, who's who, and why this is quite delicate. So you have two rounds, first round and the second one. Now, the National Rally is expected to win somehow 36% of the vote. If the candidates of the party manage to win, let's say, dozens of seats in the first round, could it be an indication that they are likely to secure an absolute majority in the second round?
Yes, but it's true that we will not know the behavior. There will be 1 week of campaign, the behavior of the electorate, of the voters in the second round. Will the problem with the candidates that desist, that they do not own their votes, so their voters are totally free. But it's true also that if we were in England, Bardella would be already the prime minister, because in England it's only one round, and in most constituencies, Rassemblement National has come first, but the French system is much more complicated. You can have what we call triangulaire, like triangle elections, with like 3 candidates. You can still be a candidate even if you are in number 3, if you had more than 12.5 of the registered voters voting for you. So it's very complicated. So nobody knows actually today in France if the Rassemblement National will have an absolute majority or if they will not have a majority. So or if we will have a kind of assembly very difficult to govern, and maybe the choice of Macron would be only could be only a technical government like Italy had Mario Draghi for long. So this is also a possibility.
All right, Rimbo, for decades, French people went to the polls to vote for either the mainstream left or the mainstream conservatives. Came 2017 and they decided it's going to be a different political landscape. The conservatives and the left indeed voted for Macron. Now it seems to be a new political realignment. You have the National Rally, you have the New Popular Front, and then you have the Ensemble Alliance. Let's talk a little bit about the New Popular Front led by Jean-Luc Mélenchon. Do you see them now? They are definitely coming second. Are they likely to become the kingmaker in the French politics?
They're in a very interesting position. They are an alliance that was a little unpredictable because they span all the way from the far left under Mélenchon's leadership all the way through to the almost centre. One interesting development is that they've got François Hollande, the former French president, rejoining the alliance. He became unpopular within his party for becoming so centrist. And so we see that they are covering a large spectrum of different parties. You've also got Green parties in there as well. And that's their strength and their weakness. It's a strength because they are capturing a wide range of the electorate and they're showing a degree of unity that people didn't think them capable of. But it's a weakness because they actually have a lot of internal disagreement. They are trying to bring together people who don't see eye to eye. They've already shown signs of dissent on some areas of policy and on the key question of if they did get into government, who would become the prime minister. They can't agree upon that. So it's quite a fragile alliance. And they have tried to recapture the voters that moved from the moderate and centre-left towards Macron in 2017. They've tried to bring them back under a left-wing umbrella. The question is whether they will stay there and stay in an alliance that could potentially offer an alternative to the far right, or whether Macron will try to get the more moderate elements of this new left-wing alliance to come back on board with him and potentially with the moderate right and ditch the far-left parties as an alternative bloc.
Hugo, it doesn't make sense when you call for snap elections, when you trade polls. Could it be that Macron, by doing this, he was hoping to see either the New Popular Front making massive gains, but they will have to struggle, and therefore people will say there's absolutely no way these people will govern and rule France, or the National Rally comes to power. They have been telling people that they will make loads of spending in the future, but we know that France does not have enough cash to spend on it for its future projects, and therefore the people will say ultimately we should have kept Macron back. That could be the only option and alternative for us. Is that what we was aiming to have?
The second part, for sure, and I think it's not simply the possibility that the Rassemblement National might come to power, but also that actually having this type of campaign would put them under more of a spotlight and there would be more scrutiny as to what exactly their positions are, as opposed to simply being a protest vote against Macron, and what kind of candidates they would put forward. And there has been cracks. There's been a couple of debates between the different parties, and Jordan Bardella has come under a lot of pressure concerning some of his policies, specifically questions of dual nationality. You had that question there at the beginning, at the top of the show. Dual nationality, what exactly is going to happen with the retirement age? So I think Macron wanted to call their bluff out a bit. That was definitely one of the strategies. We'll see now whether that's going to work. I think he was surprised on the left side that they were able to come so quickly to an agreement that they would form an alliance. Now, as has just been said, there are tensions within that alliance. Policy-wise, they seem to be holding the line. For them, there were big questions about what exactly the role of France's support with Ukraine would be. But the big question, as just been pointed out, is who's going to lead that party on? The ecologists, the socialists, the kind of more centre-left voters very much do not want to see Jean-Luc Mélenchon, the kind of more left-wing populist, a bit more of a firebrand. They don't want to see him, and they've been saying a lot, you know, he'd be better off not being involved too much in this campaign. So there's real tensions there, and as I think you rightly pointed out, and this is what we'll see next week, is whether there's already been calls from the Macron camp to try to bring the centre-left back in, to have this alliance, the same alliance he had in 2017, that is to say, the centre-left voters, those of the socialists, perhaps some of the ecologists also in there, and then some of what's left centre-right party, right, the Républicains, that is split at the moment. The vast majority now is still in the party, but Éric Ciotti, as we saw, tried to join the Rassemblement National. Can Macron again, and some of his lieutenants, his former Prime Minister Edouard Philippe has said, you know, we should try to have this kind of centre-left and centre-right alliance. And again, perhaps there's the option of the technocratic government, but perhaps there's also a kind of an option of a national unity government. This is something that hasn't really been done much in the Fifth Republic, but we're in uncertain times. Who knows what the future right there?
Uncertain times indeed. Renaud, could it be now that Jordan Bardella is the strongest pick to become France's next Prime Minister? Because obviously you have to pick always the Prime Minister from the biggest political party, and they are slated to become the biggest political party.
Yeah, so it's sovereign, it's a free choice by the president who he appoints as a prime minister. Then, of course, the prime minister proposed to the president ministers to be appointed.
Don't be a wimp, man. Hang on to it a little bit longer.
He could
throw it when it's gone.
President Macron could choose somebody else that would need the support of the parliament of
don't be a whip, man. Hang on to it a little bit longer.
289 MPs. But it's quite likely because it would be very difficult, even if Le Front National doesn't have a absolute majority, it would be quite difficult for the president not to appoint Jordan Bardella, because after all, he won the elections saying that he wants to become the prime minister. It's on his
He thinks
board,
we can't see him hiding back there.
It's not hidden. It's not a
Smoke
hidden
his eyes.
agenda. So if the electorate votes for
Man,
Bardella,
he took his eyes.
it would be very difficult
Need I say
in
more?
democracy not to appoint Jordan Bardella.
Good
And
news,
for
champ.
tactical
Next up,
reasons
ballistic
also,
shield. Now
maybe
get your
it
ass
would
over
be
to the
good
marker.
for Macron
Sometimes you get caught
to
out in the
have
open. Shit happens. When you do, you deploy the shield.
Rassemblement
No
National
big deal.
government, because
The shield's been deployed, but you can still dance,
it
baby.
can be
Shoot from the
very,
hip. See for yourself. You are showing a big promise. Now, mount a major melee masterpiece on it.
in France, the treasury is very bad and so on. So it can be the will of President Macron maybe,
Keep a grenade
and nobody
cooked. All your
understands
guests
this
have arrived.
decision he
And then you
took.
serve it
But
hot.
maybe his plan is to have Rassemblement National weakened by the exercise of power. So in 3 years, when there is the
Out of time here, man. Shoot him while he's stunned. Get your lazy ass over there while he's still stunned. You toss that near me again, I'll put a boot up your ass. Focus. Get going. of time here, man. Shoot him while he's stunned. Get your lazy ass over there while he's still stunned. All right, he's blind. Now go get him. Now that was a can of whoop ass. Get to the next marker, man. You're gonna love this. Fortify the front of your shield, and you get greater protection, but it comes at a cost. You lose mobility. Now, fortify a shield and breach that room. See? Snug as a bug in a rug. Now put a little charge on him. Make the shield into a fort, man. Transform it. You are a fucking artist, man. Bet your ass. Makes a great room breach combo. You toss in a 9-bang, then bum rush it with the shield. Who loves you, baby? We got more incoming! Set up the meat grinder. We got more incoming! Set up the meat grinder. We got more incoming! Set up the meat. We got more. We got more incoming! Set up the meat. We got more incoming! We got more incoming! Set up the meat grinder.